It is time. Let's go. All right, so it's, what is today? It's Thursday, the 13th of June, 12:47 p.m. Eastern Time. I have the pleasure to run one of our CG Talks here today with Ron Pestner, whom I will introduce in a moment. This is obviously a talk on internal product councils, and when I interviewed Ron for my book, he told me about the terrific work that he's been doing there with his team. And I thought this is something that members need to know. And he graciously agreed to share. So just a couple of housekeeping things. Everybody's on mute. Use the Q&A interface that you see there if you have a question. And you can also just send me a chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A interface. But if you have a question while Ron is talking, post it there. And I'll make a judgment call if I think it's worth pausing for a moment and having Ron clarify or address something. And at that moment, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll wait until he's gone through and we have an interactive session. Ron, I think we're going to do like 20 minutes, something like that, 25 minutes.
Sounds great.
Q&A with everybody. That'll take us through the hour. Great. So we have more of these coming up. We actually have one next Friday with Beth Comstock, who I've known for a number of years. She was the president of NBC Universal, the CMO at GE, and she's put out a new book on closing the imagination gap. And I'm excited to have her join us. We have more of these planned. And I just want to just remind everyone that we have almost every day, we have peer coaching calls where members bring a question. Like, so for example, yesterday, one of our product members has just taken a chief product officer job at another company. So we set up a call to just help him think about the first 60 days. We brought 5 chief product officers together in a Zoom format to have a private conversation. And, you know, it was he said it was extremely helpful. So we're doing those all the time, and we want you to bring us questions. Charlie is running that, and it's very, very exciting. The last thing I'll say is we're in Chicago in the fall. Brittany and Maya are going out there next week or 2 weeks from now, and there's a lot of exciting things planned for the council meetings then. All right, so let's get to the heart of the matter here. So let me just tell you a little bit about Ron, and then I'll turn it over to you, Ron. So Ron today is a director of program management at Microsoft. He's what's called a senior partner, which is sort of a leadership designation for a few hundred people at the company out of 120,000 employees. He's been there since around 2005. He's worked in the Xbox division, the Windows division, and today he runs a large team of product managers and UX leaders, and has developed a great retention and development strategy that his team loves, which is what we'll talk about today. His team, just so you know what his team does, they're tasked with building and enhancing the shared experiences across Microsoft Office. Okay, so they work on collaboration, identity, security, core UX, new Surface hardware, their Surface laptop product, or really, pad/laptop product, and then Office on all platforms, Win32, Mac, web, and mobile. And most of the work that Ron's team does is with partner teams across Office and elements of Windows. And since product management, I think we can all agree, is an apprenticeship profession, and much of his team does not actually work directly together, Ron has really thought about how to help them learn from each other as well as improve the experience they're having as employees and their retention. And his solution was to develop internal peer coaching product councils. And so he holds regular peer coaching sessions for his team. And in these sessions, individuals at similar career stages, but with different bosses, gather in groups of 3, kind of an ad hoc council for peer coaching. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, Ron. I think it's really terrific what you've been doing there. So Ron and I went to business school together. We actually ran an internet conference together back in 1997 and 98.
The Neolithic period.
Yeah, he worked with early stage startups funded by Paul Allen, who you guys know is the co-founder of Microsoft and sadly passed away recently. And as I said, has been at Microsoft now for certainly more than a decade. So Ron, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thanks so much, Phil. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share what we've been doing. And as you said in the introduction, kind of the impetus for this was really sort of two things. One was my experience in the Collaborative Gain Council experience. And then we did a training at Microsoft for a bunch of senior leaders that followed this peer consultation process. And there was quite a lot of commonality between the two. And so that was really kind of bringing these two concepts together is really what inspired doing this on my individual team. A couple things maybe to call out. I've included as part of the pre-read for this, the handout that we use for the peer consultation process so that, and I'll step through it in a minute, but it's really like, feel free to take this and use this with your own teams as a guide to help facilitate one of these sessions.
Yeah.
And
hey, Ron,
yeah.
you mind if I just wanted to say one more thing.
Sure.
So obviously, you've got a team of 90, right?
Yep.
Some of the people on the phone have smaller product teams.
Yep.
You and I talked about this. It may be difficult for them to run this internally, but one of the things we can certainly help with is if they want to pair up with other companies in their areas and have product teams from different companies get together, that makes sense. So anyway, we'll come back to that. But
yeah, you can talk about sort of ways to implement this, and I've experimented with two different ways to implement this. One of them, as Phil talked about, being a product manager is really a lot about it's an apprenticeship and experience-driven type profession, and so a lot of our focus, at least at Microsoft, and from talking to friends at other companies, it sounds like it's quite similar. A lot of the focus is on getting a mentor for individuals on the team. So someone at the next career stage, maybe someone else they can learn from. And that's good and interesting, but a lot of times in those relationships, the mentor is maybe a couple years out of what that person is experiencing in their career. And so it's quite powerful to sort of couple that mentoring type relationship with more of a peer coaching type relationship. And a couple of elements that make that effective, similar to the councils, is really thinking through how to get people together that are at a similar career stage that maybe don't know each other, but definitely don't have the same manager. And so the nature of my group is that we all work on similar type problems, but with a bunch of different application teams across Office. And so it lends itself quite nicely to this kind of format where you can get people together at similar career stages that don't necessarily know each other's day-to-day work, but they see a lot of similar patterns and are able to give advice to each other. And so it's proven to be quite effective. Just a little piece, kind of to Phil's point earlier about what to do with smaller groups. I've also run this exercise with remote sites that we work with. So like I have a team in Boston, actually in Cambridge, and they're part of a larger site, but the entire site has a collection of smaller teams. And so I've done this with product managers at that site with the site manager as a way to build some camaraderie and connections within that site as well. So there's sort of this interesting kind of team building part that goes with this that's kind of a nice ancillary benefit as people get to build their network, which is super important, particularly for people earlier in career, and it's a way to be able to share advice. The other thing I will say about this process, which is interesting, and I'll step through what we were shared with in training and that I refined with Phil. It's interesting. I went into this thinking that it would be more valuable or most valuable for the individuals who are presenting their challenge or their business challenge and seeking advice and asking for help. And what I found in the process that it was actually as beneficial or potentially even more beneficial in some cases to the individuals who were giving advice. And this is particularly powerful with people earlier in career that think that they've sort of had this siloed experience and they're unaware of how valuable that experience is and they find out about it by way of giving advice to a peer.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I was in a similar situation, this is what I did. And that really helps build confidence of the individuals that are providing the advice because they see that they have valuable insight and skill that can be applicable to another situation.
I'm glad you saw that, Ron. You know, this is a major theme of my next book. That when you ask for help, what you're doing is it's a giving activity because it's actually helping the other person,
Yeah.
often even more than yourself. But you need that person to ask for help to trigger that dynamic. And I think it's sort of, you're right, for younger people, like, whoa, wait a minute, I actually can be helpful here. I know something. And it also deepens learning, right?
Yeah.
Because by you realize, oh shit, I didn't even know. I probably shouldn't swear, but we're recording. The FCC won't come after me, I guess. But anyway, great point, Ron. Keep going.
But so the other maybe part to think about with this is you particularly like, and I don't think this is unique to my team, my immediate team, but so much of what we do, increasingly more and more, we see this with all of our major enterprise customers too. Information workers have to puzzle over problems that really span different disciplines, different groups. Like you've got to get a group of people together to problem solve. My team does a lot of problem solving with individuals that are in application teams like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Visio, Forms, Teams, Outlook, Skype. And so what you find is that kind of tools that you've used in different situations, being able to compare those tools about what techniques, how did you approach this problem, what was the nature of the problem. It's almost like doing a case study, a business school case study around a specific problem. And so people can kind of broaden the tools in their toolkit and try on different things.
So just so it's clear in everyone's head, so like one person who works for you might be focused on collaboration, but
Yep.
kind of embedded in the Excel team. Is that right?
Well, actually, they're on my team and they're working with someone on the Excel team to enable collaboration in Excel.
Okay, and then they don't really know the people who are working on the Word collaboration or the Skype collaboration or the whatever, right? And that's part of what you're doing is bringing them together, and so they can share lessons and see how each other's working. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. Any questions on this before I go into the handout?
Yeah, let's just pause for a moment. That's a good point. So I think we've set some context, and then Ron is going to walk through the methodology of how he runs these ad hoc councils. Any questions before we go into that? Looks like we're okay, but let's just pause for 30 seconds in case people want to type something here. All right. I'm not seeing anything. So
Okay.
I think you can go ahead, Ron. Yeah,
Great. All right. So I'll just describe this, and again, feel free to use this.
Question. And I think we were going to send. Charlie? Did we send that handout out?
No, we did not. That's going to be sent at the end of this. I just wanted some context so that people didn't really know what was going on.
Why don't you send it out right now, Charlie?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
That would be great.
And
Yeah,
do you want me to attempt to project it?
Yeah, why don't you let's see what that's like for a moment, but Charlie will send it so that, yeah. Can you zoom in a little bit, like 150% or something like that?
Can you see the peer consultation process document?
Yes, we can see it. It's just a little zoom in there so we can. What's it at right now? Like 100%?
100, yeah.
Do like 150.
Okay, how's that?
That's pretty good. Maybe just a little bit bigger, actually. Try 200. Sorry.
No problem.
I think that's good. I think that's readable. And people should have this in their email as well. But go ahead, Ron.
Okay, so So what I've included is it will seem like a fairly formulaic process. And so this is something just to kind of keep in mind as you go through it. There is a little bit of a method to the madness. So what I'll do is I'll get the group together. This is totally optional for people on my team, but I get really high attendance, and I do it roughly every 6 weeks. So it's just like over lunch, I block 90 minutes for the process, and it's a time for people to come together. And so what I'll do is a really quick intro, and people now understand what the purpose of the process is and what they can expect to get out of it. And then we divide up by career stage. And because I know the individuals on the team, I'm able to kind of organize folks into, and we've got 3 main categories of career stage. So it's pretty easy for people to get into roughly their peer group.
And where are we? Are we in a lunch? Are people eating lunch in a lunchroom or something like this?
No. So I book a fairly large conference room, and then I also have a breakout room for that's a smaller conference room for people that are participating remotely.
Okay.
I've got some team members in Vancouver, BC, and also in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that often participate in this as well. So it's a time for them to kind of, I have a smaller room so that they can participate remotely.
Right. Okay.
And then what we do is you typically get into groups of 3. Occasionally I'll allow a 4th if it's an odd group of people, but it's usually groups of 3. And it follows this process. You pick one person in the group has a business challenge that's current, something they're currently working on, something that they find challenging, and that they want advice on. They're asking for help. So the 3 people.
Is that ever an issue? Do you ever have a situation where no one's willing to step forward in a group of 3?
No, I don't. We don't. But we could do maybe a little more hygiene on trying to get people that have challenges that are burning on the top of their minds they want to talk about. But it works out. I have not yet had it not work out well, where people seem fairly open to either giving advice or seeking help. So then groups get together and they pick the person that's going to be the case presenter, and then we go through this time allocation of these steps. And I described the steps a little bit up front. I would just warn people in advance that there are stages of this that do feel a little awkward, and they're frankly awkward by design. And I'll mention that in a few minutes. And then I keep time, and the groups split around the room, and I typically spend time going from group to group and listening in and making sure that they're not stuck on something or they know what to do. So the process is there's a case presentation that goes for 5 minutes, and this is where the person who is presenting the case talks about their business challenge, like what about this is challenging to them. And it's important in this for them to identify exactly what the challenge is and what they're struggling with and ask for help. And this 5 minutes goes super quick. So I find that I almost always have to cut people off to be able to move forward, but it's critical that they identify exactly what the challenge is to them personally.
Yeah.
And the next step is this step of clarifying questions that we do for 9 minutes. And this is where any of the case, the consultants can ask the case presenter clarifying questions about the challenge. And it's really, really important that, that they not slip into problem solving in this stage. This is one where they're just asking clarifying questions, trying to get information from the case presenter so that they can then come up with a recommendation.
And Ron, for many of the people on the call have been a part of the peer coaching calls that we do,
Yes.
which more or less follows this same format. They're certainly familiar with the clarifying questions piece and how we don't want to slip into, shared experiences or advice yet.
That's perfect.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, and then the third section is what we call diagnostic brainstorming. And this is probably one of the more awkward parts of the process, where the case presenter is not allowed to speak during this section. So they're just observing. and the folks that are consulting or offering advice are, you probably heard this term, going to the balcony. But that's the goal of the group, is to kind of pull themselves away and kind of look at the case presenter and their situation and do some brainstorming around what might be happening, or how they might think about this challenge. And I've included some sort of questions or thoughts for to stimulate the discussion. And I find that the hardest part in this is for the case presenter to be silent and really listen. They can take notes during this time to refer back to them, but it's an interesting thing because it gives the case presenter a good view of, well, did I describe this? Based on my description, here's what people are thinking about might be the issue, and it's a completely different perspective than what they maybe brought to the problem. Anything you'd mention on this, Phil?
No, I think, I think it's great. I think, one of the things that I like to emphasize is the difference between shared experience and advice. And, I always like to see people couch it, if possible, couch advice in shared experience and stories. And then, that's not always possible, but I think it can be easier to hear. And it's also fruitful for everyone to hear the lesson in context of the story. Mm. Yeah.
And then the last two steps are action step brainstorming. So this is the opportunity to have a discussion and make some recommendations about what the consultants might suggest to the case presenter as things they may do to help with the business challenge. And so this is the advice giving portion. And then the very last part is the presenter reflection. And this is a time for the person who presented the case to provide their overall reflections on, wow, this is an insight I wasn't expecting, or wow, that idea that you had, I might, I call it rent the idea, like you might try them out. And really, it's a way for the person who presented the case to reflect on what they gleaned from the experience.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, what I'll typically do is do just a little mini retrospective at the end to cement the learnings from this with the entire group. So like, hey, what did you find useful or interesting? What was your experience going through this? What was awkward? What suggestions do you have on ways that we might supplement or augment this to get more out of it? And
Ron, is that happening with the whole group coming back together?
The whole group, yeah, coming back together at the end.
So there'll be like 30 of these, right? Because there's 3 people and there's 90.
Yeah.
Something like that scale. Okay.
Correct. And it's remarkable to me how similar the shared experience is for folks. The case presenters, 9 times out of 10 get some different perspective that they didn't get before that's incredibly useful for them. The people providing advice are always stunned at how rewarding that has been.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, just in terms of feedback or things that I've gotten some feedback on around this, one is I tried to design this in a way so that it could just be done ad hoc too, so that people could just tap into expertise around them and not feel like they had to wait 6 weeks to discuss their business challenge. And that's gone really well. Like I've often run into people that are in small groups that they don't work together, or don't have the same manager, and they're having these discussions in between. And so people have taken that as a next step, which is interesting. That's also a relief valve in case most people want to do present their own case. They're able to gather that same group of 3 people and just do it ad hoc themselves.
And about how many can you tell? You don't know, really. It's kind of.
I don't know, but I've had probably a dozen people on the team indicate that they've found enough value in this that they've been doing it with their peer relationships. I think it skews a little bit more earlier in career. Like this is kind of a more of a millennial thing as opposed to people a little bit later in career. But it's sort of a more natural way that they do this informally anyway. So this is a way to maybe have it be slightly more structured. The other piece of feedback I've received, which I thought was interesting and that we've decided not to do, is oftentimes people who are at one career stage are quite interested in listening in on the discussions and the problems that are faced by the next career stage. And so people who are, maybe they want to understand, well, what do people at the next sort of tier, what do they think about? What do they talk about? And I've been pretty hardcore about not opening up to that because I think it will change the dynamic of the discussions and make it harder for people to share. And I think that's really more what mentoring is for, so that, if there's a way, or shadowing someone, like that's, I think, a better venue to do that than have that come into the peer coaching process.
Okay.
So that's it. Any questions, thoughts?
Yeah, we do have, I have a few questions, but I've asked a number already and people are beginning to ask them on the Q&A. So I'm
Okay.
actually gonna pull them in live. Audrey, I'm gonna unmute you, allow to talk. I think that will bring you in here. Might just take a moment for the video to show up. So Audrey, by the way, Audrey Mungel's a longtime member, Ron. She's a director of global product management at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, and has done several peer coaching calls with us. Audrey, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Talking permitted. There might be, let's see, what is happening here? All right, I'll just ask her question. For some reason, there was an audio thing there. So Audrey said, I'm just going to read this. You mentioned you book the room and send out the invite. Do you attend this session? And I think you do an overview and then walk around, right? And do other managers attend? Like, do other peers of yours come in and help? And what are you and they doing during the small group sessions? I think you're walking around, if I recall. Yeah.
Correct. So on this, I do have managers on my team come. My peers do not participate in this,
Yeah.
nor do their organizations. But I'm there, and my role is to facilitate the discussion. So like I'm the one who's getting people organized and managing time and stepping through, sort of moving along the discussion, and then I lead the retrospective at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, we have some more questions. I want to try this again. For some reason, for Audrey, it said it failed to find her microphone, whatever that means. So Johnny, I'm going to call on you. And let's see, allow to talk. Let's see if this works. Johnny, can we hear you? Try talking a little bit. Is going to give us the same problem. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, there you are. Excellent. All right, so Johnny's at John Deere, and they're in the midst of developing a new product culture there, which they haven't had, like many legacy companies. Johnny, what's your question for Ron?
Well, my question was around how do you guys define career stages? You've mentioned, I think, that you have roughly 3 career stages. I'd be interested in sort of what your thoughts are around how you define those stages and how you split people up.
Great. So it's kind of, maybe it's easier for us than most. That's a great question. So we have a college hire for us. It's really mapped to their level and their title we have what we call standard titles, which are the title that is represented in the address book for email. So we have a set of folks that are right out of school, and they're program management 1 and program management 2, and that's basically level 59 to 62 for us. And then we've got a senior band. And so when you cross into the next level, 63, 64, you're called a senior PM. And then when you pass 65, so 65, 66, 67 are all considered principal PMs. And so it's pretty easy for me because I can just be like, look, PM 1s and 2s in one category, senior PMs in a second category, and principal PMs in a third category. So trying to do it in a way that maps to, if you have a clean mapping between standard title or like the way that people are referred to, or what they might write on their resume, and career stage, that is an easy, clean way to do it without disclosing, what someone's exact level is in the organization.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Great to hear your voice. All right, Soon Bak, I'm going to unmute you. So he's a relatively new member of the councils, but Ron, he comes to us through Amy Katamatsu.
Oh.
Ron and Amy and I worked together on that internet conference back in the 90s, and Ron knows Amy well. I had dinner this week with Soon. He's sold a couple of companies, and he's actually now starting a new company focused on peer-to-peer learning for more junior folks, kind of via a mobile app. So lots to say about that, but Soon, what's your question for Ron?
Thanks, Phil and Ron. Ron, I'm just curious about the 3-person format. I assume you tried different group sizes, and we're just kind of wondering about the dynamics when you have 4 people, 5 people, or more.
It's a great question too. Yes, we have experimented with different sizes. 3 seems to be optimal, just given the time and time allocation for each stage. 4 we can get away with, but anything more than that, it becomes what you find, what we found is that you'll get individuals disengaging because they feel like they can't participate as effectively, and particularly the case presenters feel like they can't share their perspectives as completely given the time allocations. So you could potentially, we haven't tried to, 90 minutes is a fairly significant commitment for folks during the day. And that gives me plenty of buffer time at both ends so that people aren't rushing. So it's really about an hour, a little bit more than an hour of content. But it would be hard, I think, to extend the time in some of the phases because people just have a hard time carving out this much time during the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Great, Soon. Thank you. All right. So the next question is from Dave Belowski. His microphone is out, so I'm gonna share this. I'll just say a few words about Dave. Dave and I have known each other a long time. He's the CEO and founder of Uncommon Goods. Some of you guys know it. It's a great retailer. If you haven't shopped there, go do that. And Ron, one of the things that really impressed me about Dave is, how some of our classmates, said, oh, I'm going to go work in finance and then I'll go start my own company, and they just never left, right? They got sucked in. Well, in '99, Dave was a managing director at Goldman, and he walked out the door and started Uncommon Goods and made it through the dot-com downturn miraculously, and is still alive today and doing well. So his question is, can you speak to some of the outcomes you've seen as a result of the exercise? I know, talk about sort of retention and learning dynamics. Maybe, I don't know if you have any examples you could share, Ron.
Yeah, so some of the outcomes that I've been probably most impressed with are a couple. One, so I'll talk about one for my team and then the other for the site in Boston. For my immediate team, I've been really stunned at how one of the challenges we have is getting us to sort of hang together as a team. And this has had a really positive impact on people feeling affinity and network for a shared experience in a shared PM team. And that's something that we do a pulse survey every year. We also do it every month about sort of like, do people feel like we're investing in their career, that they get good training, that they understand, how they're working on, what they're working on helps them advance their careers. And my results of those types of questions this past year were up quite substantially over the year prior when I was not doing this. So this is not the only thing we've been doing, but this is something that people definitely refer to, and they see the benefit from it, and it's having a pretty substantial impact on anonymous responses to employee surveys around those types of questions and those issues. What's fascinating about that is you can imagine our annual poll is often a place where cynicism finds its home. So you can, so I look at this and think, okay, if we're able to significantly move those measures in the poll, that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
For the remote site, they also struggle, particularly we've got a number of development sites that are subscale. The one that we have in Boston definitely is that it's a collection of smaller teams, and they struggle with building community there. And the head of the office has remarked at how effective and the positive feedback that she's received from the sessions I've run there. And they really have found it to be a way to kind of connect people that sit on different floors in the building, don't normally work together, but build a stronger community among the PMs in that location.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great. So there's more we can say about that, Dave, but I think that's answered your question. And now there's another question which will, I think, be relevant to you, Dave, and to some of the other people on the call. And it goes to what I brought up at the very beginning. Ron has a team of 90, and they also work across divisions. So it's very easy for him to run this internally. For those of you who have smaller teams, what do you do? So Suzanne Constance is the VP of Product Management and Marketing at Wolters Kluwer. And she's in their Lean Solutions, LIEN, sort of real estate mortgage type stuff. And Suzanne, I'm going to unmute you here so you can join us live. Hopefully it'll work. Your microphone will work. So I just hit unmute. Can you say a few words? Let's see if we hear you. Suzanne? Okay. All right. Listen, if it's good, well, I'll just mute you again and I'll read your question. And again, I think this is relevant to you, Dave, but also to a number of you on the call. How large a group do you need to do this well? She says she understands participants need different managers. Does it need to be a relatively large population across different teams? What are your thoughts on that, Ron?
Yeah, I think this scales pretty nicely, or at least it seems to scale pretty nicely. You don't have to have a large group of people in order to get value out of this. Like, I think you could just have a nucleus of probably 6, maybe. So you could,
as long as they had a couple of different managers. Yeah, that's the key.
That's right.
Right. And if you only have one product team in your organization, which some of you do, Suzanne, I think you have more than that, then you can pair up with companies in your area.
Yeah.
And frankly, we'd be happy to help you connect with council member companies and sort of see if you can try something that way.
Yeah, that would be an easy thing to do too. But like, you literally, if you've got good dynamics between the 3, you could just have 3 people do this and they would find it valuable. If you're struggling to build some of those dynamics, you could probably get away with 6 and have 2 different groups and rotate people through if you get the right chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. Hey, there's a couple of people on the call that I'd like to maybe call in. I'm thinking of John Seebeck and Brent Turetsky. Why don't you guys shoot me a chat and let me know if I can call on you. In the meantime, Audrey Mongol, who I introduced earlier, just had another quick question, Ron. How often do you do these? You said every 6 weeks, and so that you're doing about 8 of these a year.
Yeah, so we started these last summer, and we go roughly every 6 weeks. Sometimes it extends out a little beyond that, but it's roughly every 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I really love this, and I love that you've taken, this is certainly one of my one of my big hopes with my book, but also with the councils in general, is that members take sort of the format and the methodology we use and bring that back to their companies for people who wouldn't normally be able to participate in something like this. To Dave's question on the benefits, younger people in my research have more trouble asking for help. Usually, when you go through a career and you develop as a leader, along the way, you eventually have to learn to ask for help if you're going to keep getting promoted and having an impact. But younger people feel like they should figure it out themselves, or it's a sign of weakness or whatever. So sort of intersecting earlier and giving them an experience like this that teaches them the power of asking for help and teaches them that, wow, someone asking me is an honor, and therefore if I ask them, it's an honor, I think can have a huge amplification on people's careers and their impact in your company.
Yeah.
I really believe that, and that's a big thrust of the book. Let's see, it looks like we've got a couple other questions coming through here. Doug Claffey, oh, and John Seebeck, you got, okay, so John, I'm gonna call on you, and then Doug, I'm gonna call on you after that. So John Seebeck, I'm gonna unmute you. Let's see if this works. Unmute. That's not working. Dang. I don't know what's going on, if it's on the Zoom side or whatever. John, I'll circle back to you. Doug Claffey, let's see if, let's see, unmute. No, okay. Doug, let me see if I can get you involved here. Doug, can you say a few words? Let's see if we can hear you.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question to the frequency question, which was every 6 weeks. And
Yeah.
if you covered this earlier, I apologize. But the question is, how many sessions are you actually conducting every 6 weeks? And how many are you facilitating or are being facilitated by somebody else? And how many are self-facilitated by the 3-person groups?
Good to clarify that. Thank you, Doug.
Great. Yeah, it's a really great question. So I facilitate the one that happens every 6 weeks. And if people want to get together in interim time, they will facilitate themselves. So like I've published out we have a place that we share various tools with the PM community. And I've published this out for folks to take advantage of and do independently. So I don't know how frequently it's happening outside of that, but I do lead the facilitation every 6 weeks.
But just to be clear, Ron, that what you mean by that is you bring the group together, you set the context, but the groups of 3, you're not facilitating those. They're doing that themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, just to be absolutely crystal clear, Doug. And hopefully that answered your question. John, if you had a comment, you don't mind typing it. Good, Doug. Please type that in here. And if anyone else wants to just share something, that would be great. We don't have to keep going. I will say that let me just see if there's are there any other questions or comments for Ron? Okay. And John, I'm sorry, I don't know why I can't unmute you. It might be something on your side or on the Zoom side. Zoom stock has done really well since they went public. All right, so you know what? And I've loved this, by the way, webinar. I'm interested to hear what all of you think. I want to do more of these where we get a practical case study from a member about something they're doing that's helping their teams or driving good product management or leadership of any kind. And Ron, I really I think you've kind of kicked off kind of a new format for us where we can dive deep into a practical thing. This has been very, very helpful. So thank you so much for doing this. Do you have any final comments or thoughts?
Nothing other than if you've got any questions or if you try this with your teams and hit a snag, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any follow-on questions that folks have.
That's great. And I have one last question for you, Ron. With the company the size of Microsoft, do you see peers of yours starting to adopt this in their product organizations or not?
Not yet. I was hoping to get it to a point where it is now and then start evangelizing it more broadly as an engagement tool for folks that are in this apprenticeship business, right? That's really very difficult for people to get a depth of experience and you want to try to pack as much in as possible for folks. So I think that will be my exercise for next year.
Well, when my book becomes a bestseller, a hit that everyone's reading, and it has this story in there, it'll help your internal Microsoft marketing and get more
For
people
sure.
involved. Last thing, just for everybody on the call, I just wanted to let you know, we're going to be sending a note out about this next week, but we're going to meet in Chicago in the fall, but in the spring of next year, we're actually going to take, I'm very excited about this, we're going to take the councils to Omaha. We're going to have the meetings just before the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. And then we'll give you the option to stay and come to the annual meeting. We'll get you a pass. Of course, if you don't want to stay for that, you can fly home. And we have an optional workshop that we do on Friday, which you can come to or not, and we'll explain that. A couple of you on the call have actually been out there. Dave Belatsky has come out with us. Audrey Munkel's come out twice. She brought, well, she didn't bring, but she and Marty Kagan came this year, which was a lot of fun. And so more on that on email next week. And then I'm going to be in Austin next week giving some talks at Brett Hertz company, Data.World, at an OTT company called Flow Sports. And if anyone's around, let me know. I'd love to see you. And I'll be in Toronto a few weeks after that. So and Maya and Brittany will be in Chicago in a couple weeks, and they're in touch with folks that are in Chicago to try to get something together and start planning for the meeting in the fall. So anyway, lots going on, and 1 or 2 peer coaching calls a day. And if you haven't done one with us, bring us a question. Charlie Riggio runs that program. And Ron, you've done it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you endorse it?
Absolutely.
It's kind of like how your teams give you feedback, right? Wow.
Yes.
Helpful.
Very.
Well, thank you so much, Ron. What a pleasure. And if any of you want to bring forward a thing like this, let us know. We'd love it. We're going to do more of these kinds of calls. All right.
Great. See you.
Thursday. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, Ron. Thank you so much.